In Cedar Grove, where memories linger like morning mist, a story of lost love is about to unfold. Mike Henderson, a small-town handyman raising his daughter alone, is about to take on what seems like just another renovation job. What he doesn't know is that the old garage he's been hired to restore belongs to Sarah Mitchell, the woman who broke his heart 25 years ago. She left town with nothing but dreams and determination. Now she's returned as a self-made millionaire, her fortune built from the ground up. But wealth can't fill the void of what she left behind. When these high school sweethearts cross paths again, they'll discover that some foundations never crack, and the most valuable restorations aren't measured in dollars, but in second chances. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Mike Henderson's morning routine hadn't changed in 15 years. Up before dawn, coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in, and a quick check of the bills spread across his kitchen table. The October sun hadn't yet cleared the horizon when his daughter's familiar ringtone broke the silence. "Morning, sunshine," he answered, watching Katie's face appear on the screen. Even through the choppy college dorm Wi-Fi, he could see the shadows under her eyes. "You're up early." "Actually, haven't slept yet," she admitted, stifling a yawn. "Midterm paper due today. But that's not why I'm calling." She hesitated, and Mike's heart sank. He knew that pause, had heard it too many times lately. "The bursar's office sent another email." Mike's eyes drifted to the drawer where he kept the real bills, the ones he couldn't bear to leave on the table. 3 tuition payment reminders, each marked with an increasingly urgent red stamp. "Don't worry about that, Katie girl. I've got a new job starting today. Big one." "Dad." Her voice carried that mixture of love and worry that made her sound so much like her mother. "Maybe I should take a semester off. Work for a while." "Not happening." He cut her off with a gentleness learned from years of single parenthood. "Your job is being a student. My job is making sure you stay one." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken words. Through the window, Mike watched his neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, shuffle out to get her morning paper, same as she had every day since he was Katie's age. Cedar Grove was that kind of town. Unchanging, reliable, sometimes suffocating in its sameness. "Tell me about the new job," Katie said finally, changing the subject with practiced ease. Mike grabbed his work jacket, phone balanced between shoulder and ear. "Old garage out on Maple Lane. Property manager called yesterday," said the new owner. "Wants it restored, not demolished. That's a nice change of pace." "Maple Lane?" Katie's voice brightened. "Isn't that where you and Mom used to—" "Different garage," Mike interrupted, though his throat tightened at the memory. "Listen, sweetheart, I need to get moving. Property manager wants to meet at 8 sharp. "Okay, but Dad?" Katie's face grew serious. "Promise me you're taking care of yourself too." Mike looked around his small kitchen. Dishes from last night's solitary dinner still in the sink, bills scattered like fallen leaves across the table, and his battered toolbox waiting by the door. Inside that toolbox, tucked where he thought, Katie didn't know about it, was an old photo and a lifetime of what-ifs. "Always do, sweetheart. Love you." "Love you too, Dad." The call ended, but Mike stayed still for a moment, letting the morning silence settle around him. Finally, he opened the drawer he'd been avoiding, pulling out the stack of notices from Cedar Grove Community College. The numbers hadn't changed, but somehow they seemed larger in the early morning light. 3 months of partial payments, each. When scraped together from odd jobs and careful budgeting, it wasn't enough. It was never enough. His phone buzzed with a text from Tom at the hardware store. "Got those specialty hinges you'll need for Maple Lane. Old-school craftsmanship. Don't make 'em like this anymore." Mike grabbed his toolbox, the weight as familiar as an old friend. The photo slipped slightly, and for a moment he caught a glimpse of a younger version of himself, standing next to a girl with dreams bigger than Cedar Grove could hold. He slammed the toolbox shut before the memories could take root. The morning was crisp, autumn painting the trees in shades of amber and gold. His truck started on the second try, a small victory. As he pulled out of his driveway, the same one he'd played on as a kid, Mike forced himself to focus on the practicalities. This job could be the break he needed, the one that would keep Katie in school, keep the lights on, keep the world turning, for a little longer. He didn't know it yet, but by sunset, his carefully ordered world would be turned upside down, and that old photo in his toolbox would be the least of his concerns. The gravel crunched under Mike's boots as he pulled up to 1452 Maple Lane. The garage stood separate from the main house, set back among old maple trees that had somehow escaped the developer's axe. Morning sunlight filtered through their branches, casting dappled shadows across weathered wood that had seen at least half a century of Cedar Grove winters. "Well, would you look at that?" Mike muttered to himself, taking in the structure. Despite its worn condition, there was something familiar about the roofline, the way the old sliding doors hung slightly askew on their tracks. He'd seen this garage before, but from where? A sleek black SUV pulled up behind his truck, and a woman in a crisp business suit stepped out, tablet in hand. "Mr. Henderson, I'm Rebecca Torres, the property manager." Her handshake was firm, professional. "Thank you for coming out so early. Just Mike is fine." He followed her toward the garage, his experienced eye already cataloguing the work ahead. The siding had seen better days, paint peeling in long strips like old wallpaper. But the bones were solid. Rebecca tapped at her tablet. The owner was very specific about maintaining the original character while bringing everything up to code. "We've had several contractors out, but they all wanted to tear it down and start fresh." Mike ran his hand along the doorframe, feeling the solid oak beneath years of neglect. Whoever built this knew what they were doing. Be ashamed to... His voice caught as his fingers found something beneath the peeling paint. There, half hidden by decades of paint layers, was a strand of old Christmas lights, the wire practically fossilized into the wood. The memory hit him like a physical blow. December 1998. He and Sarah had spent an entire Saturday stringing lights around this very garage, planning to surprise her parents. The ladder had wobbled, and she'd grabbed his jacket to steady him, both of them laughing in the cold. Later that night, with the lights twinkling above them, "Mr. Henderson, is everything all right?" Mike pulled his hand back as if burned. "Fine, just checking the wood integrity." He stepped back, professional mask firmly in place. "You said the owner wants to maintain original character." Rebecca nodded, making notes. "Everything possible should be preserved or restored to original condition." The owner was particularly interested in keeping any historical elements intact. Mike's eyes traveled up to the rafters where he knew, without having to check, he'd find their initials carved in a heart. "Young Loves." Graffiti preserved in oak. "Timeline?" he asked, forcing himself to focus on the practical. 8 weeks, give or take. The owner will be monitoring progress personally, though they're currently out of town on business. Rebecca handed him a thick envelope. "Here's the initial payment and full scope of work." The owner was insistent on hiring local talent. Mike thumbed through the paperwork, eyes widening slightly at the figure on the check. This could cover Katie's tuition through spring, with enough left over to finally fix the truck's transmission. "One more thing," Rebecca added, pulling something from her portfolio. "The owner provided these, said they might help with historical accuracy." She handed him a small stack of photographs. Mike's hands trembled slightly as he looked at the top photo. The garage in its prime, decorated for Christmas, lights twinkling against fresh white paint. The timestamp in the corner read December 1998. "I'll need to do a full assessment," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "Check the foundation, support beams, wiring. Of course, take all the time you need today. Here's my card for any questions." Rebecca started back toward her car, then paused. "Oh, and Mr. Henderson?" The owner mentioned something about Christmas lights, said they were an important feature to restore. After she left, Mike stood alone in the autumn morning, surrounded by maple leaves and memories. Above him, hidden in the shadows of the rafters, A single strand of ancient Christmas lights still clung to the beam, silent witness to a moment 25 years gone, when two teenagers believed love could light up the world. He reached for his toolbox, determinedly not looking at the photo tucked inside. He had a job to do, nothing more. But as he began his inspection, every measurement, every note in his journal felt like reading pages from an old diary he'd tried to forget. Mike spent the next 3 days methodically documenting every inch of the garage, trying to ignore how each discovery felt like turning pages in a forgotten photo album. He was examining a support beam when the familiar sound of Katie's old Honda pulled up outside. "Thought you had classes today," he called out, not turning around. "Professor cancelled. Thought I'd surprise my favorite handyman." Katie's footsteps echoed on the concrete floor. "So, this is the famous garage project." Mike glanced over his shoulder, catching the knowing look in his daughter's eyes. She'd inherited her mother's intuition along with her smile. "Just another job, Katie girl." "Right." She wandered the space, running her hand along the walls exactly as he had days earlier. "And I suppose these Christmas light hooks are just another detail too." Mike's hammer slipped, nearly catching his thumb. "Been going through your mom's old photos again?" "Maybe." Katie pulled herself up to sit on a sturdy workbench. "She used to tell me stories, you know, about the boy who strung up Christmas lights in July just to make a girl smile. Your mother always did have a flair for dramatic storytelling." Mike focused intently on the beam above him, but the carved initials seemed to glow in the morning. Light, MH plus SM, surrounded by a heart that had outlasted the relationship it commemorated. "Dad." Katie's voice softened. "I know about Sarah Mitchell." The name hung in the air like dust motes in sunlight. Mike lowered his hammer slowly, feeling every one of his 43 years. "What exactly do you know?" "Mom told me before she died. Said I should know about the girl who taught you how to love big enough to be the father I'd need." Katie hopped down, moving to stand beside him. "Said Sarah Mitchell broke your heart, but she made you brave enough to risk it again with Mom." Mike closed his eyes, memories washing over him. Sarah's laugh echoing off these very walls, the way she danced under the Christmas lights, planning their future. The morning he'd found her note, explaining how her scholarship to Princeton couldn't wait, how some dreams were too big for small towns. "Ancient history," he managed. "Maybe." Katie reached up, tracing the carved initials with her finger. "But from what Mom said, Sarah Mitchell was the one who got away, the one you never quite got over. Your mom shouldn't have." "She wasn't jealous, Dad. She understood. Said loving Sarah Mitchell made you the man she fell in love with." Katie pulled an envelope from her back pocket. "Which is why I thought you should see this." Mike recognized the Cedar Grove Community College letterhead. "Katie, I told you not to worry about tuition." "It's not about tuition. Look at the board of directors list." His eyes scanned down the page, stopping at a familiar name. Sarah Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Innovation Technologies, newest member of the college's board of trustees. "She's back in town," Katie said softly. "Has been for a few months, according to Mom's old gossip network. Bought some property out on Maple." Her voice trailed off as understanding dawned. Oh, Dad." Mike stared at the name on the letterhead, pieces falling into place. The specific restoration requests, the Christmas lights, the historical photos. "Dad?" Katie touched his arm. "Are you okay?" He carefully folded the letter, tucking it into his shirt pocket next to the day's invoices. "I'm fine, but don't you have studying to do?" "Don't change the subject. This is huge. The universe is practically—" "The universe," Mike interrupted, "is not doing anything. This is a job, that's all." But his eyes drifted to the carved initials, to the Christmas light hooks, to all the pieces of the past he'd been trying to ignore. Katie watched him for a long moment, her expression so like her mother's, it made his heart ache. "You know what Mom would say about this? That some things are better left in the past?" "No," Katie smiled, gathering her bag. "She'd say some foundations are built to last, even when we try to build something else on top of them." She kissed his cheek. Don't work too late, Dad, and maybe think about what it means that she wants to restore this place instead of tearing it down. After Katie left, Mike stood in the lengthening shadows, surrounded by echoes of a love story he thought he'd finished reading decades ago. Above him, a strand of Christmas lights caught the late afternoon sun, twinkling like a memory of what might have been, and maybe, though he couldn't admit it yet, what still could be. The autumn rain started just after dawn, drumming against the garage roof in a steady rhythm that made Mike think of old slow dance songs. He'd arrived early, hoping to finish the beam restoration before the weather turned worse. The radio played, softly from his truck, morning news mixing with the sound of rain and his own steady work. He didn't hear the car pull up. "The craftsmanship really is remarkable," a voice said from behind him. "They don't build things like this anymore." Mike froze, chisel hovering over wood. That voice. Different now, more polished, with the kind of confidence that came from boardrooms and corner offices. But underneath was the same melody that had once sung Christmas carols in this very garage. He turned slowly, telling himself he was ready. He wasn't. Sarah Mitchell stood in the doorway, the grey morning light silvering her dark hair. She wore a tailored coat that probably cost more than his truck, but her hands were tucked into the pockets just like they used to be when she was nervous. 25 years fell away in an instant. "Hello, Mike," she said softly. He realized he was still holding the chisel, gripping it like an anchor. "Ms. Mitchell." The formality felt wrong in his mouth, but calling her Sarah seemed dangerous. "I didn't expect the property manager didn't mention that I was the owner." A smile flickered across her face. "I asked Rebecca to be discreet. I wanted to see—" She gestured at the garage, but her eyes never left his face. "You look good. You look successful. Beautiful. Like every dream he'd tried to forget. Different. 25 years will do that." She stepped further into the garage, her designer boots leaving delicate prints in the sawdust. Her eyes tracked up to the beam where he'd been working. "You found our initials. Professional restoration requires thorough inspection of all structural elements," he said stiffly, pulling his professional armor around himself like a shield. "Always the perfectionist." She reached into her coat and pulled out a leather-bound planner. "I found this last week going through some old boxes. Look at the margins." Despite himself, Mike moved closer. The planner was from 1998, its pages worn soft with age. In the margins of nearly every page, in teenage Sarah's handwriting, was his name. Hearts, little drawings of Christmas lights, dreams scribbled in purple ink. "I was cleaning out my parents' attic," she explained. "Found a whole box of high school memories. This was in there, along with—" She paused, and for a moment he saw the 18-year-old girl beneath the CEO's polished exterior, along with the letter I wrote the night I left. Sarah. Her name slipped out before he could stop it. "Why now? Why this garage?" She ran her hand along the wall, just as Katie had done days earlier. "Would you believe me if I said I didn't know it was you when I hired you? Cedar Grove Construction Services. I thought it was just another local company. But you knew before today. Rebecca mentioned your name in her first report." Sarah turned to face him fully. "I could have hired someone else. Should have, probably. But when I saw your name—" She smiled, a real smile this time, the one he remembered. "Some things you just can't walk away from twice." The radio in his truck switched to an old song, one they had danced to under Christmas lights all those years ago. The universe, as Katie would say, had a sense of humor. "I should get back to work," Mike said, turning back to the beam. "These repairs won't finish themselves." "Of course." He could hear the disappointment in her voice. "I have meetings in the city anyway. I wanted to see for myself. See you." She was almost to the door when he spoke again. "The Christmas lights." She paused. "What about them?" "In the restoration specifications, you were very specific about the Christmas lights. Some memories deserve to be preserved," she said softly, "even if we try to paint over them. After she left, Mike stood motionless, breathing in the scent of sawdust and rain and expensive perfume that lingered in the air. His phone buzzed, Katie probably checking in, but for a long moment, he just stood there, letting himself remember what it felt like to be 18 and in love, stringing up Christmas lights in a garage that now held more history than holiday decorations. Finally, he picked up his chisel again. There was work to be done, and he had bills to pay. But as he worked, he found himself humming the song from the radio and wondering if some foundations, once built, never really crumbled at all. The next morning brought clear skies and complications. Mike arrived at the garage early, hoping to lose himself in work before his thoughts could catch up with him. But as he unrolled the original blueprints across his makeshift workbench, he found himself tracing the familiar outline of the Christmas light mounting points he'd installed so long ago. You know, normal people don't start work at sunrise. He looked up to find Katie leaning against his truck, 2 coffee cups in hand. She wore her mother's old Cedar Grove high sweatshirt, the one that always made his heart twist a little. Normal people don't skip their morning classes, he countered, accepting the coffee. Actually, I'm here on official business. Katie pulled out a folder with the college logo. The Board of Trustees is doing a series of student interviews about campus improvements. Guess who I'm scheduled to meet today? Mike's coffee cup froze halfway to his mouth. Katie, relax, Dad. It's just a coincidence. Her innocent expression wouldn't have fooled anyone. Though I did notice Ms. Mitchell specifically requested me from the student panel. Before Mike could respond, the purr of a luxury car engine announced Sarah's arrival. She stepped out looking every inch the successful CEO in a blue business suit, but her confident stride faltered slightly when she saw Katie. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had company, Sarah said, her eyes moving. Between father and daughter, Katie stepped forward, hand extended. Catherine Henderson, but everyone calls me Katie. I'm the student representative you're meeting with this morning. Something flickered across Sarah's face. Recognition, perhaps, or remembrance. Of course. Katie, I should have made the connection with the name. She looked at Mike. She has your eyes. Mom's smile, though, Katie said easily. And Mike watched Sarah absorb the implications of that statement, the subtle shift in her expression. I hope you don't mind meeting here, Sarah continued, recovering smoothly. I'm overseeing some renovation work, and my schedule is rather tight. The famous garage restoration. Katie's eyes sparkled with barely contained mischief. Dad's been working really hard on it. Have you seen the original Christmas light mounting points? There's quite a story behind those. Mike suddenly became very interested in his blueprints. Katie, don't you have a meeting to conduct? Right here is fine, Sarah said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. The acoustics in this garage are quite remarkable. Something about the way the sound bounces off the rafters, especially around Christmas time. Mike's pencil snapped. Katie pulled out her notebook. You know, Ms. Mitchell, Dad never really talks about his early construction projects. Were you around Cedar Grove when this garage was first built? Catherine Rose Henderson, Mike warned. What? It's a legitimate historical question for the restoration project. Katie's innocence wouldn't have convinced a toddler. Sarah laughed, the sound echoing off the walls, just as it had 25 years ago. Actually, I was. In fact, she walked over to the blueprint, standing close enough that Mike could smell her perfume. These mounting points here, they were installed by a very determined young man who believed Christmas lights could fix anything. Really? Katie's eyes were wide with exaggerated interest. Tell me more about this determined young man. I think, Mike interrupted, rolling up the blueprints with more force than necessary, that the Board of Trustees might be more interested in your ideas about campus improvements than ancient history. Ancient? Sarah raised an eyebrow. I wouldn't say ancient, more like well-aged, like a fine wine. Or like Dad's truck, Katie added helpfully. Mike pointed toward the garage door. Don't you two have an official meeting to conduct? We do, Sarah agreed, but her eyes lingered on him for a moment. Though sometimes unofficial history can be just as important as official business. She turned to Katie. Shall we walk? I'd love to hear your thoughts on the science building renovation. As they walked away, Mike heard Katie ask, "So, about those Christmas lights?" And Sarah's answering laugh carried back to him on the morning breeze. He turned back to his work. But the blueprints kept swimming before his eyes. Every measurement, every note seemed to be written in memories instead of ink. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he could hear his late wife's voice. Some love stories, Mike Henderson, take more than one chapter to tell. The sound of Sarah. And Katie's conversation drifted in and out as they circled the property, two parts of his life intersecting in ways he'd never imagined possible. He tried to focus on his task list, on the practical realities of restoration work, but his eyes kept drifting to where they walked, heads bent together in conversation, the past and present blending like watercolors in the autumn sun. The newspaper clipping fell out of an old junction box Mike was replacing, yellowed and creased but still legible. Local student becomes youngest CEO in tech industry. Sarah's photograph smiled up at him, younger than she was now, but older than the girl he'd known. The article detailed her meteoric rise, how she'd built Mitchell Innovation Technologies from a dorm room startup into a Fortune 500 company. I always hated that picture. He hadn't heard her approach. Sarah stood in the doorway, more casual today in jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage payment. But something about the way she leaned against the frame reminded him of the girl who used to do her calculus homework on the garage workbench. "Found it in the wiring," he said, holding up the clipping, along with about 20 years of dust. "Keep it. I've got a whole box of press clippings I never—" "Read?" She stepped inside, surveying his progress. "The restoration's coming along beautifully, just following specifications. Always so modest." She ran her hand along a newly restored beam. "Katie told me about your work with historic buildings. Downtown, the old theater renovation. That was you." Mike focused on gathering his tools. "Small town, not many contractors to choose from. I looked you up, you know, after Rebecca mentioned your name." Sarah perched on the edge of his workbench, just like she used to. Cedar Grove Construction Services has quite a reputation. 3 state preservation awards, articles in restoration magazines. You've built something remarkable here, Mike. Built a life, he corrected, trying to keep his voice neutral. "That's all. That's everything." She pulled something from her back pocket, another newspaper clipping, this one crisp and new. "This morning's business section. Thought you might want to see what you're competing against." The article outlined plans for a major development company moving into Cedar Grove. Modern apartments, shopping centers, all promising progress and prosperity. And buried in the middle, a quote about historic buildings being potential obstacles to growth. "They've already bought the Miller property on Oak Street," Sarah continued, "and they're eyeing the theater district." "Why show me this?" "Because they contacted me last week. Wanted to know if I'd be interested in selling this property." She watched his face carefully. "Offered 3 times market value." Mike's hands stilled on his toolbox. "Smart business decision." "Probably. They've got plans drawn up already. Modern townhouses, a fitness center. Very sleek, very profitable." She stood, moving closer. "Want to know what I told them?" He could smell her perfume again, something expensive, but with an undertone of the same vanilla she'd worn in high school. "Your property, your choice. I told them some things aren't for sale. Some foundations deserve to be preserved." She touched his arm lightly. "I also told them about a local contractor who specializes in historic restoration. Said they should talk to him about preserving rather than demolishing." Mike looked at her then, really looked at her. Beyond the designer clothes and CEO polish, he caught a glimpse of the girl who'd once dreamed of changing the world. "Why? Because you were right, all those years ago." She smiled, a hint of remembered pain in her eyes. "Christmas lights can't fix everything, but sometimes they can light the way back to what matters." A sudden gust of wind scattered leaves through the open garage door, and one of the old Christmas light strands swayed, catching the sunlight. For a moment, neither of them spoke, letting the weight of memory and possibility hang in the air between them. "I should get back to work," Mike finally said, but his voice had lost its professional edge. "Of course." Sarah headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and Mike, Katie mentioned you're doing some work for the college. I'm having dinner with the board tonight. Maybe we could discuss potential contracts. Strictly business, of course." Before he could respond, she was gone, leaving behind only the scent of vanilla and the rustle of newspaper clippings documenting the lives they'd lived apart. Mike picked up the article about her success, carefully folding it and placing it in his wallet next to Katie's latest tuition bill. Some memories, he was learning, refused to stay safely buried in junction boxes. The rejection letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. Mike found Katie sitting on the garage workbench when he arrived, the crisp white paper crumpled in her hands. "I thought you had class," he said, though he already knew something was wrong from the set of her shoulders. "Emergency Financial Aid Committee meeting." Katie smoothed the letter against her thigh. "They declined my scholarship appeal. Said there just isn't enough funding this semester." Mike set his toolbox down carefully, buying time to steady his voice. "How much?" "Dad." "How much, Katie?" She handed him the letter. The number at the bottom made his stomach clench. 3 months of restoration work on the garage wouldn't cover half of it. "I can withdraw," Katie said quietly. "Take a semester off, work at the diner like Jenny does." "No." The word came out sharper than he intended. "We'll figure something out. I've got that bid on the Thompson place, and if I pick up some extra—" "The Thompson contract went to Valley Modern Builders." Katie's voice was gentle. "Jenny's dad told me yesterday. They underbid everyone." Mike leaned against the workbench, feeling the solid wood beneath his palms. The same developers Sarah had warned him about. First the Miller property, now the Thompsons. The dominoes were starting to fall. "I'm not giving up on your education." He reached for his phone. "I can call the bank, maybe take out another—" I couldn't help but overhear. Sarah's voice from the doorway made them both jump. She stood there in a charcoal business suit, tablet in hand, looking every inch the CEO, except for the concern in her eyes. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude." Katie quickly wiped her eyes. "Miss Mitchell, I was just leaving for class." "Actually, Katie, would you mind staying? Both of you should hear this." Sarah stepped into the garage, her heels clicking on the concrete floor. "The board met last night about the scholarship situation. It's affecting more students than just you." Mike straightened, instinctively moving closer to Katie. "We'll figure this out ourselves," Sarah continued as if he hadn't spoken. "Mitchell Technologies has a new educational initiative. Full scholarships for students focusing on community development and historic preservation. The board approved it last night." She smiled at Katie. "Your proposal about incorporating local history into the new student center design. It impressed a lot of people." Katie's eyes widened. "But I only mentioned that in passing during our walk." Sometimes passing comments reveal our true passions. Sarah's eyes met Mike's for a moment. "The scholarship is yours if you want it. No strings attached." "That's very generous," Mike said stiffly. "But, Dad," Katie's voice held a note of her mother's no-nonsense tone. "This isn't charity, it's an opportunity, like when Mr. Wilson gave you your first construction job. This is different." "Is it?" Sarah asked softly. "Mr. Wilson saw potential in a young man who cared about preserving old buildings. I see the same potential in your daughter." She placed a folder on the workbench. "The scholarship paperwork, if you're interested. And Mike?" She paused at the door, paused. "Sometimes accepting help isn't a sign of weakness. Sometimes it's about having faith in foundations you didn't build yourself." After she left, Katie picked up the folder with trembling hands. "Dad?" Mike stared at the space where Sarah had stood, remembering another time she'd tried to help him, offering to defer her Princeton acceptance, to stay and build something together. He'd been too proud then, had pushed her to follow her dreams instead of compromising them. Watching her walk away had nearly broken him. What would Mom say? Katie asked quietly. Mike closed his eyes, hearing his late wife's practical wisdom. Pride makes a poor substitute for a good education, Mike Henderson. We'll look at the paperwork, he finally said. No promises. Katie hugged him fiercely, and he felt her tears soaking into his work shirt. Above them, the autumn sunlight caught the old Christmas lights, making them gleam like forgotten promises finally remembered. The storm warning started coming in around noon. Mike was up in the rafters, reinforcing a weak joint, when Sarah burst through the door, her usual corporate composure replaced by urgent energy. We need to secure everything, she said, not bothering with hello. Weather Service just upgraded it to a severe system. They're expecting 70-mile-per-hour winds. Mike glanced through the window at the darkening sky. I've got tarps in the truck. Already called my contractor in the city. They're sending emergency supplies. But with the traffic, she was already rolling up her sleeves, designer watch catching the dim light. Sarah, you don't have to... A crack of thunder cut him off, and the first heavy drops began hammering the roof. Sarah gave him a look that hadn't changed in 25 years. Are we really going to argue about this now? They worked in practiced synchronization, as if the years apart had never happened. Mike secured the roof, while Sarah moved through the interior, helping him identify vulnerable spots. The wind picked up, howling through the old building like a living thing. The yearbook, Sarah suddenly exclaimed, diving for a shelf where water had started seeping in. She pulled out a leather-bound volume, clutching it protectively. Class of 98. Found it in a box last week. Mike climbed down to help her move boxes away from the leak. You kept our yearbook? Some things you don't throw away. She opened it to a dog-eared page. The Halloween carnival photo. Him and Sarah in front of this very garage, surrounded by the Christmas lights he'd strung up to create a haunted house. Another thunderclap shook the building. Sarah jumped, instinctively grabbing Mike's arm. For a moment they were teenagers again, sheltering from another storm in this same garage, believing they had all the time in the world. Mike, the voice, cut through the rain. Katie, running toward the garage with an armload of supplies. Dad, the creek's rising. Mrs. Peterson said it's already over the bank by the old mill. Sarah immediately switched to CEO mode. We need to sandbag the entrance. The foundation on this side is vulnerable to flooding, Mike finished. I remember. Their eyes met, sharing the memory of the spring flood their senior year, both of them working through the night to save the garage. Katie looked between them, understanding dawning on her face. I'll call the volunteer fire department. They always need direction in storms like this. Already done, Sarah said, pulling out her phone. I've got 3 of my company's emergency response teams en route, but we need to focus on this structure. And first, if that creek rises another foot, the whole foundation could shift, Mike nodded. Katie, get the wooden supports from my truck. Sarah, help me with these sandbags. They worked as the storm intensified. 3 people moving in coordinated effort against the elements. Mike couldn't help but notice how naturally Sarah directed emergency resources, how effortlessly Katie integrated into their workflow. The garage groaned around them but held firm. Just like old times, Sarah said during a brief pause, rain plastering her expensive silk blouse to her shoulders. Remember the flood of 98? You were supposed to be at that Princeton interview, Mike grunted, stacking another sandbag. Some things were more important. She helped him position the bag, their hands brushing. Still are. Katie appeared. With more supplies, lightning illuminating her determined expression, so much like her mother's, but with Sarah's old fire in her eyes. Creek stabilizing. Fire department's got the mill road under control, but we should reinforce that north wall. They worked through the afternoon and into evening, their world narrowed to this garage and its preservation. As darkness fell, Mike rigged up his work lights, the beams cutting through the rain in a way that reminded him of Christmas lights from long ago. Finally, the storm began to ease. They stood in the doorway, watching the creek slowly recede, their clothes soaked and muddy, but the garage secure. We did it, Katie said, exhausted pride in her voice. We actually did it. We did, Sarah agreed softly, looking not at the garage but at Mike. Some foundations are built to weather any storm. You just have to be willing to fight for them. Mike felt the weight of those words, heavier than all the sandbags they'd stacked. Some storms, he was learning, came to destroy, but others came to wash away the dust of years, revealing what had been solid all along. The storm's second wave hit just as Katie left to coordinate with the emergency teams. The sudden downpour trapped Mike and Sarah in the garage, the road already flooding again outside. In the dim light of the work lamps, they looked like slightly older versions of their yearbook photo, still standing in the same spot where they'd once promised forever. "Katie got your determination," Sarah said, wringing water from her ruined blouse. "And your mother's stubborn streak," Mike added, earning a small laugh. Sarah wandered to the workbench, absently tracing water patterns on the wood. "Speaking of mothers, I was sorry to hear about Claire. She was a good woman. She was." Mike busied himself checking the tarps. "She understood me. Even the parts that were still," he trailed off, "still hung up on someone else." Sarah's voice was gentle. "Katie told me Claire used to talk about me, about us." Mike turned to face her. "Why did you really come back to Cedar Grove, Sarah?" Before she could answer, her foot kicked something under the workbench. A metal box, weatherproofed and sealed, covered in decades of dust. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted it. "I remember this," she whispered. "Your father's old toolbox. You used to keep—" "Don't." But she was already opening it. Inside, preserved perfectly, lay a mixtape. The label, written in Sarah's teenage handwriting, read "Christmas Lights and Forever Promises, Summer '98. Beneath it was a Princeton acceptance letter and a much-folded note in Mike's handwriting that had never been delivered. "You kept it," Sarah said softly. "All of it." "Sarah?" "No, let me finish." She held up the undelivered note. 25 years, Mike. 25 years I've wondered what this said. Why you never gave it to me before I left." Mike closed, his eyes remembering the weight of that unsent letter. "Because you had dreams bigger than this town, bigger than me. That wasn't your choice to make, wasn't it? Look at you now, CEO, Fortune 500 company, everything you ever wanted." "Everything I thought I wanted." Sarah's voice cracked slightly. "Do you know what I remember most about building my company? Not the IPO, not the awards. I remember sitting in my first corporate apartment, listening to that song we danced to in this garage, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life." Thunder rolled outside, but neither of them noticed. Sarah placed the mixtape carefully on the workbench. "I came back to Cedar Grove because I finally admitted something to myself," she continued. "All those Christmas lights you used to string up, they weren't just decorations. They were you lighting the way home. Every success, every achievement, I kept looking for that same light. But corporate fluorescents aren't the same thing. Sarah, I bought this garage the day it went on the market. Paid triple the asking price because some developer was eyeing it for townhouses." She ran her hand along the wall. "I told myself it was about historic preservation, about saving a piece of Cedar Grove. But really, I was saving the only place I've ever felt completely myself." Mike moved closer, drawn by the pull of memory and truth. "You were right to leave, to follow your dreams. I was right to chase success," she corrected. "But I was wrong about what success looked like." She picked up the undelivered note. "May I? After 25 years?" He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Sarah unfolded the paper carefully, reading the words he'd written the night before she left. "Sarah, some people are meant to change the world. You're one of them, and some people are meant to make sure there's still a world worth coming home to. That's me. I love you enough to let you go, but I'll be here, keeping the lights on, if you ever want to find your way back." "Mike." The work lights flickered as another thunderclap shook the garage. Sarah looked up, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "You know what I've learned in 25 years of corporate success?" She stepped closer. "The world doesn't need changing nearly as much as it needs preserving. The things that matter, the real foundations, they're worth coming home to. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside the garage, surrounded by Christmas light hooks and the ghosts of teenage promises, something long dormant began to stir back to life. Dawn broke over Cedar Grove like a watercolor painting, storm clouds giving way to streaks of pink and gold. Mike stood in the garage doorway, watching volunteers from the fire department help clear debris from Maple Lane. The storm had left its mark, but the old garage stood firm, a testament to craftsmanship and stubborn determination. Coffee? Sarah appeared beside him, holding 2 paper cups from May's diner. She'd changed into borrowed clothes from Katie's emergency bag, looking oddly more herself in jeans and a college sweatshirt than she had in designer suits. Thanks, he took the cup, their fingers brushing. The touch felt different now, weighted with last night's revelations. A commotion at the end of the street drew their attention. Tom Fletcher from the hardware store was leading a group of townspeople their way, carrying supplies and what looked like breakfast containers. "Renovation rescue party," Tom called out, grinning. "Thought you might need some help getting this place back in shape." Sarah stepped forward. "You really don't have to—" "Actually, we do," Mrs. Peterson interrupted, already rolling up her sleeves. "Some of us remember what this garage meant to Cedar Grove." She gave Sarah a knowing look. "The Christmas carnival? The haunted house fundraisers? My Henry always said this place had more community spirit than the town hall." Mike watched as his neighbors spread out across the property, falling into an efficient rhythm of clean-up and repair. The bulletin board from the local coffee shop had been water-damaged in the storm, its collection of community thank-you notes now scattered across the garage floor. As volunteers gathered them up, Mike couldn't help but notice how many bore his name. "Need drywall repair? Call Mike Henderson. Thanks to Cedar Grove Construction for saving the church steeple. Mike H. fixed Gran's porch swing. No charge. Good people still exist." Sarah picked up one of the notes, reading it silently. "They love you here," she said softly. "Really love you, not just as a handyman. It's home," he replied simply. Katie arrived with more volunteers and supplies, seamlessly organizing work crews. She moved between groups with natural authority, reminding Mike so much of Sarah in their student council days that his chest ached. "She's amazing," Sarah murmured. "You did that, Mike. Built something more valuable than any Fortune 500 company." "We all build what we can." Mrs. Peterson approached them, brandishing a hammer. "Sarah Mitchell, is that you hiding in those borrowed clothes? Good. Come help me with these loose boards. Just like when you used to help with the Halloween decorations." Mike watched as Sarah was absorbed into the work crew, her corporate polish giving way to genuine enjoyment as she fell back into the rhythms of small-town life. She caught him looking and smiled, not her CEO smile, but the one he remembered from summer nights and Christmas lights. The morning passed in a blur of community effort. Someone hooked up an old radio, playing the same station that had soundtracked their teenage years. The garage, battered but unbowed, gradually shed its storm damage under the care of dozens of hands. "Mr. Henderson?" A young voice caught his attention. Jenny Thompson's kid brother held up a sodden photograph found in the cleanup. This was stuck behind some boards. The photo showed the garage on Christmas Eve 1998. Lights twinkled against the snow, and 2 young figures stood in the doorway, their whole lives ahead of them. Mike started to hand it back, but the boy had already run off to help his sister with debris removal. "I remember that night," Sarah said, suddenly beside him again. "You said Christmas lights could make any place feel like home." "Young and foolish," Mike muttered, but he carefully tucked the photo into his shirt pocket. "Young, yes. Foolish." Sarah gestured at the scene around them. Neighbors helping neighbors, community rallying around a piece of its history. "Look what you built here, Mike. Not just structures, foundations, connections, the kind of success they don't teach in business school." From somewhere nearby, Katie called for help with a fallen branch. The morning sun broke fully through the Clouds, catching the remnants of last night's rain on the garage roof. For a moment, the droplets sparkled like Christmas lights, turning the old building into something magical. Sometimes, Mike said quietly, home just needs a little light to find its way back to. The corporate merger documents arrived by courier 3 days after the storm. Sarah sat in her temporary office, a converted corner of the garage, staring at the thick folder emblazoned with her company's logo. The morning light filtering through, the newly repaired windows cast shadows across terms like immediate relocation and New York headquarters. Her phone buzzed with another message from her board of directors, third one today. They weren't happy about her extended stay in Cedar Grove, about the resources she'd diverted to storm recovery, about any of it. A knock on the door frame interrupted her thoughts. Mike stood there, tool belt slung over his shoulder, looking concerned. "Everything okay? You missed our morning walkthrough. Just some company business." She tried to slide the papers out of sight, but he'd already glimpsed the letterhead. "Looks important." "It's—" She was cut off by Katie bursting through the door, face flushed with distress. "Dad, the university bursar just called, even with the emergency extension. If we can't—" She stopped short, seeing Sarah. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "Interrupt." Mike's expression tightened. "Katie, we talked about this. The scholarship fell through," Katie finished. "Budget cuts. They're scaling back all new programs, including the Historic Preservation Initiative." She pulled out a formal letter, hands shaking slightly. "They're suggesting I withdraw for the semester." Sarah stood up, corporate crisis momentarily forgotten. "That's impossible. The board approved." "The board meeting this morning," Katie said quietly. "They reversed a lot of decisions. Something about merger priorities and resource reallocation." Mike and Sarah's eyes met across the room, understanding passing between them. The same merger documents sitting on her desk were about to derail his daughter's future. "I can fix this," Sarah said, reaching for her phone. "Let me make some calls." "No." Mike's voice was firm. "No more corporate solutions. No more trying to solve everything with money and influence. We'll figure this out the Cedar Grove way." The Cedar Grove way. Sarah felt her CEO persona slipping back into place like armor. "You mean struggle and sacrifice and watching dreams get deferred? Because that's not good enough. Not for Katie." "Dad," Katie interjected, "maybe Sarah's right. If she can help, the same help that disappears the minute corporate priorities change." Mike gestured at the merger documents. "The same help that comes with relocation clauses and New York headquarters." The words hung in the air like frost. Sarah felt the familiar pull between two worlds, the corporate empire she'd built and the small-town foundation she'd rediscovered. "That's not fair," she said softly. "You know, I'd never what? Leave." The moment he said it, Mike seemed to regret it, but the damage was done. Katie looked between them, understanding dawning on her face. "I should go. I have a meeting with my advisor anyway." She squeezed her father's arm as she passed. "Don't let history repeat itself, Dad. Not over pride." After she left, the garage felt too small and too large all at once. Sarah picked up the merger documents, running her fingers over the embossed logo she'd designed herself, back when corporate success seemed like the only kind of foundation worth building. "I'm not that 18-year-old girl anymore, Mike. Don't run away from hard choices." "No," he agreed, his voice softening. "Now you just buy and restore what you left behind." The truth of it stung them both. Outside, a truck from Valley Modern Builders rolled past, probably heading to another acquisition in town. The future was coming to Cedar Grove, whether they were ready or not. "They're giving me 48 hours, Sarah finally said, holding up the merger papers, "to commit to the New York relocation, to stop splitting my focus between corporate headquarters and—" She gestured around the garage at all the half-finished restoration work. "And this is just a garage," Mike finished. "Just another property to renovate and sell." "You know it's not." Sarah moved closer, close enough to catch the scent of sawdust and coffee that always seemed to follow him. But I built something. Out there too. Something that employs thousands of people, that makes a real difference in the world. Then I guess you have a choice to make. Mike picked up his tools, heading for the door. Again, the morning sun caught the newly cleaned Christmas light hooks, making them glimmer like memories of simpler choices. Sarah watched him go, too, worlds pulling her in opposite directions, wondering if some foundations were too damaged to ever fully restore. The magazine lay open on Mike's workbench, its glossy pages catching the morning light. Fortune's 40 under 40. Sarah Mitchell revolutionizes tech industry. The article detailed her net worth, billions, not millions as he'd assumed, and listed her properties around the world. A penthouse in Manhattan, a villa in the south of France, a private island in the Caribbean, and a small garage in Cedar Grove, buried at the bottom of her real estate holdings, like an afterthought. I was going to tell you. Sarah stood in the doorway, still in yesterday's clothes. She'd clearly come straight from an all-night board meeting about the company's true value, about the scope of everything. Were you? Mike's voice was carefully neutral as he gestured to the article. Before or after you bought half of Cedar Grove? She stepped into the garage, exhaustion evident in every movement. What? The historic theatre district. The old mill? The Richardson property? He pulled out property records he'd discovered at the county clerk's office. All bought through shell companies owned by Mitchell Technologies, all in the last 3 months. I was protecting them. Valley Modern Builders has been working with your company's real estate division for the past year. Mike's laugh held no humor. Tom's son works in county records, did some digging after the merger news broke. Sarah sank onto the workbench, the CEO mask crumbling. It's not what you think. No, because from here, it looks like you came back to buy up my whole world, like some kind of, nostalgia shopping spree. That's not fair. Fair, Mike's control finally snapped. Fair is spending 15 years building something real here. Fair is knowing every family's story, every building's history. Fair is not playing corporate chess with people's lives. I was trying to help by playing both sides, working with Valley Modern while pretending to fight them. He shook his head. The Sarah Mitchell I knew would never. The Sarah Mitchell you knew didn't have the power to protect what mattered. Her voice echoed off the garage walls. You want to know the truth? I've spent 25 years building an empire, gaining enough influence to make sure that what happened to us wouldn't happen to anyone else. What happened to us? Mike's voice dropped dangerously low. You left. That's what happened. Because I couldn't stay and watch this town slowly die. Because I needed to become someone who could make a difference. She stood up, cross to him. Every acquisition, every merger, every billion added to my net worth. It was all to have enough power to preserve places like this, to give opportunities. To kids like Katie. The mention of his daughter hit him like a physical blow. Leave her out of this. I can't, because she's just like I was. Bright, ambitious, torn between loyalty and opportunity. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. But she doesn't have to choose. That's what I've been trying to tell you, with my resources, with the foundation I'm establishing. So that's your solution. Throw money at everything. Buy up the past and renovate it like some kind of corporate fairy godmother. Dad? Katie's voice from the doorway made them both turn. She held her laptop open to Sarah's company website. Is it true? About the Cedar Grove Preservation Initiative? Sarah nodded slowly. The board approved it this morning. Full college, scholarships, historic building restoration grants, small business support programs, everything this town needs to thrive without losing its soul. And all it costs is our independence, Mike said bitterly, our right to build our own future. No, Katie's voice was firm. It costs accepting that sometimes help comes from unexpected places, even places that hurt us before. She looked at her father. Mom used to say that pride makes a poor foundation. Katie, she's right. Sarah reached into her bag, pulled out a thick folder. This isn't about buying the past, Mike. It's about building a future that honors it. The merger, The New York relocation. I turned it all down this morning, because some things are worth more than corporate empires. The morning sun broke through the clouds, catching the Christmas light hooks above them. In its glow, Mike could see both versions of Sarah, the girl who'd left to change the world, and the woman who'd come back to save a piece of it. 25 years, he said quietly. 25 years building walls to protect what matters. Maybe, he looked at Katie, saw his late wife's wisdom in her eyes. Maybe it's time to build bridges instead. Evening settled over Cedar Grove like a familiar blanket. Sarah sat on the garage workbench, a collection of postcards spread before her. Each one captured a different city, a different triumph. Tokyo after her first international merger, Paris. When she opened the European headquarters, New York, the day her company went public. "You kept them all," Mike said from the doorway, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "Bought them everywhere I went." She accepted the coffee, their fingers brushing. "Never sent them. Just wrote what I wished I could say, then packed them away." Mike picked one up. "Rome, the Colosseum at sunset." On the back, in Sarah's elegant handwriting, "Closed another deal today. The board is thrilled. All I could think about was how you would have loved the local carpenter's workshop I passed. Some successes feel hollow without someone to share them with. I tried dating, you know," Sarah continued, sorting through the postcards. "CEOs, entrepreneurs, even a prince once. Society pages loved it. But they all wanted the Sarah Mitchell from the magazine covers." She looked up at him. "None of them knew the girl who helped string Christmas lights in a garage in Cedar Grove." "Sarah, let me finish, please." She pulled out another postcard. Cedar Grove's main street, still, showing Thompson's Hardware and May's Diner. "I bought this the day I made my first million, sat in my corner office, looking out at Manhattan, and all I could think was, I wonder if Mike still fixes Mrs. Peterson's porch swing every spring." Mike settled beside her on the workbench. Close enough to smell her perfume, still vanilla under all the designer fragrances. "He does. Some things don't change. But some things do, need to." She gathered the postcards, decades of unspoken words. "I built an empire trying to prove something, to my parents, to Princeton, to myself. Kept thinking if I just achieved enough, acquired enough, it would fill this." She gestured vaguely at her heart. "Did it?" "You know it didn't." Sarah's laugh held a touch of self-deprecation. "I have a private jet, Mike. I can fly anywhere in the world at a moment's notice. But the only place I've wanted to land is right here, because of nostalgia, some teenage romance, because of foundation." She turned to face him fully. "You know what I've learned running a Fortune 500 company? Everyone wants to build something new, something revolutionary. Nobody wants to preserve what matters. Nobody wants to remember where they came from." Mike thought of the development plans threatening Cedar Grove, of Katie's struggles to honor both progress and preservation. "And that's what all this is about? The property purchases, the preservation initiative?" "Partly." Sarah pulled one last postcard from her bag. Brand new, still blank, a photo of their garage taken just last week. But mostly it's about finally admitting that success isn't just about what you build. It's about what you protect, what you come home to. Outside, Katie's voice carried from the driveway as she arrived with dinner. The smell of May's meatloaf, still the best in 3 counties, wafted through the open door. "I'm not that teenager anymore," Mike said quietly. "The one who thought Christmas lights could fix everything." "No," Sarah smiled, touching his hand. "You're the man who taught an entire town that some things are worth preserving. Who showed his daughter that success isn't measured in dollars." She squeezed his fingers. "Who kept the light on long enough for a lost CEO to find her way home." Katie appeared in the doorway, taking in their joined hands with poorly concealed hope. May threw in extra mashed potatoes, said something about feeding starving corporate types real food. Sarah laughed, not her polished CEO laugh, but the real one, the one that had echoed off these walls 25 years ago. "Your father used to say May's meatloaf could solve world peace." "Still can," Mike found himself saying. "If you're willing to stay for dinner." The invitation hung in the air, weighted with possibility. Through the window, the setting sun caught the Christmas light hooks, making them sparkle like promises waiting to be renewed. "I think," Sarah said softly, "I'm willing to stay for more than just dinner." The joint renovation proposal lay open on the garage workbench, fresh ink glistening under the morning light. "Cedar Grove Historic District Restoration Project," read the header, with both their names listed below. "Mitchell Technologies and Cedar Grove Construction Services." "It's a good plan," Mike said, studying the detailed drawings. "Ambitious. Too ambitious." Sarah stood beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "For one contractor? Maybe." He turned to the next page. "For a partnership? Could work." The word partnership hung between them, carrying weight beyond business proposals. Before either could address it, Katie burst through the door, waving an envelope. "Dad! Sarah, look!" She thrust the letter forward, beaming. "Full academic scholarship, not just for this semester, for the whole program." Mike took the letter, reading quickly. "Cedar Grove Preservation Studies Fellowship. The board approved it this morning," Sarah explained. "Not just for Katie, for any student focusing on local architectural history and restoration." Someone, pretty persuasive, made a case for investing in the next generation of preservation experts. Katie's grin widened. "Mrs. Peterson might have mentioned that her grandson is interested in historical architecture too." Mike looked between them, his daughter, and the woman who'd once broken his heart, now working together to build something new from the foundations of the past. "You two planned this?" "Actually," Katie said, "it was Mom's idea, sort of." She pulled out an old journal from her bag. Found this in her things. She'd written out all these ideas for preserving Cedar Grove's history, protecting what made it special. She just didn't have the resources to make it happen. Sarah touched the journal gently. "Claire always could see the bigger picture." "She saw you coming back," Katie said softly. "Last entry, about a month before she died. She wrote that sometimes the best foundations are built on second chances." Mike felt the familiar ache of missing Claire mixed with something new. Hope, maybe, or possibility. "The Preservation Fellowship is just the beginning," Sarah continued, pulling out more papers. "The Historic District Project will need apprentices, interns, people who understand both innovation and tradition." She smiled at Katie. "People who can bridge two worlds." "Speaking of bridges," Katie said, pulling up something on her phone. "The community board loves the idea of converting the garage into a heritage center. They're already planning events." Mike looked around the space that had held so many memories. "A heritage center? Think about it, Dad. The place where Cedar Grove's past and future finally meet." Katie's eyes sparkled. "We could host preservation workshops, community events, maybe even that Christmas carnival Mrs. Peterson keeps talking about reviving." "With Christmas lights?" Sarah asked innocently. Mike felt a laugh bubble up, unexpected but welcome. Some traditions are worth keeping. The morning sun streamed through the windows they'd restored together, catching the dust motes in its beam. Outside, they could hear the sounds of Cedar Grove waking up. May's delivery truck, Thompson's hardware raising its shutters, the familiar rhythm of small-town life carrying on. "You know," Katie said, gathering her things for class, "Mum also wrote something else in that journal. She said that love stories don't always end where we think they do. Sometimes they just need time to find their way home." After she left, Mike and Sarah stood in comfortable silence, looking at their joint proposal, at the future they might build together. "She's right, you know," Sarah finally said, "about finding our way home." Mike reached for her hand, feeling the years between them fade like morning mist. "Welcome home, Sarah Mitchell." The Christmas light hooks above them caught the sunlight, twinkling like stars in the daytime sky, witnesses to an ending that had somehow become a beginning. The job offer arrived by private courier, just as Mike was installing the new Heritage Center sign above the garage doors. "Director of Historic Preservation, Mitchell Technologies, New York office," read the header, followed by a salary figure that made his hands shake. It's a good opportunity, Sarah said from behind him. She looked exhausted, her usual corporate polish dimmed by worry. The company needs someone who understands real preservation, not just profit margins. Sarah. He turned to face her. What's really going on? She sank onto their workbench. He'd started thinking of it as theirs, somewhere in the past few weeks. The board is pushing back. Hard. They say the Cedar Grove initiative is too costly, too focused on one small town. They're threatening to override my decisions. Can they do that? I may be CEO, but I still answer to shareholders. She ran a hand through her hair, a gesture that reminded him of the teenage Sarah stressing over calculus. They're demanding a return to New York permanently. Say the company needs a more present leadership. The weight of the job offer felt heavier in his hands. And this is your solution? Move me to New York? Move us to New York, she corrected. Katie could transfer to Columbia. They have an excellent architectural preservation program. We could leave Cedar Grove, leave everything we've built here, to build something bigger. She stood, crossing to the wall where they'd hung the community bulletin board. Notes and photos covered its surface. Restoration projects, heritage center plans, Katie's scholarship announcement. Think of what we could do with Mitchell Technologies' full resources. We could preserve historic districts across the country, create opportunities for thousands of students, while our own town gets sold off to developers. Mike gestured out the window where Valley Modern's latest project was rising. Who would protect Cedar Grove? Sarah pulled out her tablet, fingers flying across the screen. I've been working on contingency plans, trust funds for ongoing preservation, legally binding covenants on the properties, a local board to oversee. Stop! Mike's voice was gentle. You can't protect everything with corporate structures and legal documents. Then what's your solution? A hint of the old fire flashed in her eyes. Watch my company slip away? Give up everything I've built? No. He moved closer, taking her hands. But maybe it's time to build something new, something that doesn't require choosing between two worlds. A knock at the door interrupted them. Katie stood there with Jenny Thompson and several other students from the preservation program. Sorry, but you need to see this. They crowded around Jenny's laptop, watching a financial news report. The headline scrolled across the bottom. Mitchell Technologies announces major restructuring. CEO position under review. Sarah's phone erupted with notifications. They can't do this, she whispered. Not without... They already did. Katie pointed to the screen where Sarah's senior vice president was giving a press conference. They're voting tomorrow morning. Mike watched Sarah's face, seeing not the powerful CEO, but the girl who'd once strung Christmas lights in defiance of winter darkness. How many shares do you need to maintain control? 34%. I have 29. She laughed bitterly. All this success, and 5% could take it all away. Unless, Katie said slowly, someone else bought those shares first. They turned to her. She was pulling up documents on her phone. The Cedar Grove Investment Coalition, local businesses, preservation supporters, community members. They've been pooling resources, buying small amounts of Mitchell Technologies stock. Led by, she smiled, Mrs. Peterson, Margaret Peterson. Sarah blinked. My old English teacher, who apparently never sold those shares you gave her when the company went public, Katie confirmed. She's been organizing this for months. Said something about making sure Cedar Grove's prodigal daughter had a safety net when she finally came home. Mike watched understanding dawn on Sarah's face. All those small-town connections you thought you left behind never really left. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message. Mrs. Peterson wants to meet tonight. Says to bring Christmas lights. Outside, Cedar Grove's main street twinkled with early evening lights, each one a testament to the kind of foundation that quarterly reports could never measure. Mike reached for Sarah's hand. Sometimes, he said softly, the best heritage projects start at home. Sarah's presentation to the Mitchell Technologies board began with an unexpected image. The old garage, strings of Christmas lights glowing against the dawn. 25 years ago, she said to the room of stern-faced executives, I left this garage to build something bigger. Today I'm proposing we make it the centerpiece of Mitchell Technology's future. Murmurs rippled through the conference room. Through the video call, Mike could see the confusion on the board members' faces. He squeezed Katie's hand as they watched from the garage-turned-heritage center. Our company started with a vision of innovation, Sarah continued, clicking to the next slide, blueprints for something that made several board members lean forward. I present to you the Mitchell Heritage Innovation Campus. The plans showed the garage and surrounding property transformed, modern glass buildings nestled respectfully among restored historic structures, solar panels disguised as traditional, roofing, state-of-the-art technology centers housed in preserved architectural gems. Cedar Grove won't just be a preservation project. Sarah's voice held the passion that had built her empire. It will be our new research and development headquarters, a place where innovation meets tradition, where the next generation of developers and preservationists learn to work together. She clicked through more slides. Katie's preservation studies, program partnering with MIT's engineering department, local craftsmen teaching alongside tech innovators, a startup incubator focused on sustainable preservation technology. Valley Modern sees this town as outdated, Sarah gestured to the plans. I see it as the perfect testing ground for everything Mitchell Technologies claims to value: innovation, sustainability, community. Mike watched the board members' expressions shift from skepticism to interest, especially when Sarah reached the financial projections, tax incentives for historic preservation, government grants for green technology, educational partnerships, and a workforce already trained in both traditional craftsmanship and modern methods. She smiled. Sometimes the most innovative path forward is the one that remembers to look back. The vote was unanimous. Cedar Grove would become Mitchell Technology's second headquarters, with Sarah splitting her time between New York and home. As the board members filed out, congratulating her on her vision, her eyes found Mike through the video call. We did it, she mouthed silently. Later that evening, they stood in the garage doorway, watching the sunset paint Cedar Grove's main street in shades of gold. The Heritage Center's new sign caught the light, casting familiar shadows where Christmas lights once hung. A whole technology campus, Mike mused, looking at the finalized blueprints. Built around a garage, built around a foundation, Sarah corrected, leaning into him. One strong enough to support something bigger than we imagined. Katie burst in, waving her phone. You have to see this. The preservation program just got 50 new applications, and MIT wants to collaborate on a joint degree in historical architecture and sustainable technology. Your mother would love this, Mike said softly. Seeing the old and new come together. Sarah touched the blueprints gently. Claire knew something I had to leave Cedar Grove to learn. That the biggest innovations don't always mean starting from scratch. Sometimes they mean seeing the value in what's already built. Through the window, they could see Mrs. Peterson leading a group of potential investors on a tour of the future campus site. Her voice drifted in, right here, where Mike Henderson once strung up Christmas lights to make a young girl smile. We're going to teach the world that progress doesn't mean forgetting where you came from. Speaking of Christmas lights, Katie grinned, pulling out a familiar box. The Heritage Center's grand opening is next month. Think it's time to start a new tradition? Mike looked at Sarah, saw in her eyes the same spark that had lit up this garage 25 years ago. Some traditions, he said, reaching for the lights, never really ended. They were just waiting for the right moment to shine again. Snow fell softly on Cedar Grove as crowds gathered for the Heritage Center's grand opening. The old garage, now restored to better than its original glory, glowed with the warmth of Christmas lights, strung exactly where they had been 25 years ago, each bulb a beacon of memory and promise. Ready? Sarah asked, standing beside Mike in the doorway. She wore a simple blue dress instead of her usual corporate attire, looking more like herself than she had in years. Almost. He adjusted one last light strand. Now it's perfect. Katie appeared through the crowd, leading a group of her preservation studies classmates. Dad, Sarah, they're ready for the ceremony. The garage doors rolled open, revealing the transformation inside. Original beams still stretched overhead, now supporting a state-of-the-art presentation system. The old workbench had become a heritage. Display, Mike's tools arranged alongside photographs documenting Cedar Grove's history. And there, protected under glass, lay a weathered mixtape and an undelivered letter, testimony to the power of foundations built to last. Mrs. Peterson stepped forward, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd. 25 years ago, two young people stood in this very spot, believing that Christmas lights could brighten any future. Today, we celebrate how right they were. Sarah squeezed Mike's hand as their former teacher continued. This heritage center represents more than just preserved architecture. It stands as proof that progress doesn't mean forgetting our past, that innovation can honor tradition, that sometimes, Mrs. Peterson smiled at them, sometimes love stories just need time to find their proper ending. Katie took the podium next, every inch her mother's daughter in her confidence. As the first graduate of Cedar Grove's Preservation Studies program, I've learned that true restoration isn't about returning something to what it was. It's about making it strong enough for what it can become. The crowd applauded as she unveiled the center's dedication plaque, in memory of Claire Henderson, who taught us that some foundations are built of love. Mike felt Sarah's hand tighten. In his, through tears, she whispered, "She knew, didn't she, even before we did." "Claire always could see the blueprint beneath the building," he replied softly. The ceremony continued as evening settled over Cedar Grove. Town officials praised the Mitchell Heritage Innovation Campus's potential. Business leaders celebrated the fusion of preservation and progress. Students eagerly discussed their upcoming projects. But it was Tom Fletcher's impromptu speech that captured the heart of the moment. "Folks have been saying Cedar Grove is changing," the hardware store owner said, his voice rough with emotion. And they're right. But thanks to Mike Henderson, who never gave up on this town, and Sarah Mitchell, who never forgot it, we're changing on our own terms, preserving what matters while building something new. As the official ceremonies wound down, Mike found himself back in the garage doorway with Sarah. Music drifted from the Heritage Center's sound system, the same song they'd danced to under Christmas lights all those years ago. "Dance with me," Sarah asked, eyes twinkling. "For old time's sake!" Mike pulled her close as snowflakes swirled around them. Through the window, he could see Katie showing her students the original Christmas light mounting points, telling their story to a new generation. "You know," Sarah murmured against his shoulder, "some people say you can't go home again." "And what do you say?" She lifted her head, smiling the smile that had first lit up his world. "I say home isn't a place you go back to. It's a foundation you build on, something strong enough to support every dream, big enough to shelter every hope. Even corporate CEOs and small-town contractors, especially them." She touched his face gently, "because sometimes the best restorations aren't about fixing what's broken. They're about remembering what was always strong enough to last." Above them, Christmas lights twinkled against the falling snow, each one a testament to promises kept and renewed. Around them, Cedar Grove embraced its future while honoring its past. And in the doorway of a garage that had become so much more, two people who had found their way home danced to the rhythm of a love story, 25 years in the restoration. Some foundations, after all, are built to last forever.